The news didn't seem to strike some of his Republican colleagues as alarming. In fact, House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy defended the president's comments last night.
Is it right for the president to say that he would listen if foreigners offered dirt on his political opponents? Is that the kind of help that you would take?
I think we all see you're talking about a hypothetical.
The president says he thought the FBI director was wrong in making that assessment.
I think what you're asking right here is a hypothetical.
He said those things, and that concerns people. And so is that a problem?
What are you most concerned about the president?
Doesn't the president have to set a tone about what is right and what is wrong?
I think the president has been very clear. The president does not want foreign governments to interfere in our elections.
He said he would
been very
welcome
strong
that
about
assistance.
that. He did not say he'd have a foreign government to interfere.
We would like you, respectfully, to please address that question and just not punt to it.
So no comment on his words yesterday?
I think if you asked the president, he would be very clear about it, not allowing any foreign countries to interfere in our elections.
Anyway, his Senate counterpart, Majority Leader Mitch McConnell, was actually silent instead of just using words that were silent. As you might expect, however, Utah Senator and 2012 Republican presidential nominee Mitt Romney was one of the few Republicans to condemn the president's comments in stark terms. Let's watch.
In circumstances where a foreign government attempts to be involved in an American election, that would be simply unthinkable for a candidate for president to accept that involvement, to encourage it, to participate with it in any way, shape, or form. It would strike at the very heart of our democracy.
Well, earlier today, Democratic Senator Mark Warner of Virginia moved to bring a bill to the floor in this Senate that would require campaigns to report foreign contacts to the FBI and the FEC by the Federal Election Commission. Republican Senator Marsha Blackburn of Tennessee blocked the move. I'm joined by Michael Steele, former spokesman for the House Speaker John Boehner, and Mika Ouyang, Vice President for the National Security Program at Third Way. Mika, this thing here, first of all, there's no sense of consistency. If this were Hillary Clinton president, if she'd won in the Electoral College, and she was sitting in the White House now and said, oh, yeah, I got help. I'll take help from dirt from the other countries. These guys would be stringing her up.
Well, you remember,
and then they all go like little Silence of the Lambs now because it's a Republican president, at least in name Republican.
Well, you'll remember at the end of the Clinton administration, there was this whole scandal around the idea that the Clinton campaign might have accidentally accepted Chinese campaign contributions. Yeah. And the Republicans went nuts. Foreign interference in our elections. How could you possibly do this? And they were incensed about the idea. And now today, when you have foreign governments offering dirt on campaigns, they seem to shrug their shoulders. It's like Donald Trump only wants foreigners in American elections and will try and keep them out of America everywhere else. It
does seem, well, Michael, you speak for the party if you can. Why is 90% of the Republican Party voters in line? No matter what this man says. We saw Access Hollywood. We saw a guy where he talked about grabbing women. We saw I can shoot somebody on Fifth Avenue, maybe 6th Avenue too, but Fifth Avenue.
Either one.
Avenue of the Americas, he would have done that too. And in every case, they say, yes, sir. Yes, sir. This is North Korean behavior.
Yeah, look.
You know what I'm saying?
At this point, a substantial portion of the American population, 90% of the Republican Party, fairly or not, accurately or not, believes that the president is fighting for them, taking on the elites in this country, and doing things that no president was willing to do before to protect their jobs and their way of life.
Thank you. In other words, as long as he hates or sticks the stick in the eye of the Democratic, well-educated elite, who think they are better, some of them, it's fine with his peeps.
The enemy of my enemy is my friend.
Yeah, I think you're dead right. Anyway, throughout today, the president's Republican colleagues were asked to respond to the president's comments. Some made it clear they disagreed with the president.
If a hostile government like Russia contacts a federal official or a federal candidate with an offer of assistance, to me, the appropriate action to take is to call the FBI.
That guy's still working right there. That's an amazing scene of America at work. But others shrugged their shoulders and deflected the question by dishing out heavy doses of, what about? What about the other side? Here they go.
Obviously, there are foreign countries that are interested in influencing our elections. We saw that in the Clinton example.
I'm a little astonished at the outrage that I've heard, because I didn't hear equal outrage when Hillary Clinton and the DNC paid a foreign spy.
I hope my Democrat colleagues will be equally offended by the fact that this actually did happen in 2016, where a foreign agent was paid for by a political party to gather opposition research.
You know, anyway, there were those who, by the way, just kept their heads down. Of the 53 Republicans in the Senate, we got contact, only 17 publicly responded to the president. Anyway, 5 told us they would tell the FBI if they were given information by a foreign government. However, 31 did not respond. Mika, the charge here, which the president has confessed to, basically in principle, is that it's okay to deal with foreign governments if they give you something of value in a campaign to win it, right? Mm-hmm. Did Hillary do that? Why do they keep saying that? What government did she deal with?
She didn't. And this is
they keep saying this crap, and it's Lindsay. This is artificial intelligence from these people. They all talk like this. They know it's not true.
Right.
And that the media has to go, thank you, objective media, write down that they said it as if it means anything.
It's very clear that there's a significant difference between what the Clinton campaign was doing and what the Trump campaign was doing, and she called him on it during the debates, and he got very offended at that. But not only that, he's still, and his campaign surrogates are still doing that, right? Rudy Giuliani trying to go to Ukraine to dig up...
The government of Ukraine.
The government of Ukraine to try and dig up dirt on Democratic presidential candidates. They are still in this business and not realizing that American elections should be saved for Americans and not for foreigners.
Was this, I'm still trying to do some psychobabble on Trump. Why did he admit all this yesterday? Was it to protect his son, his namesake?
I think that could be part of it. I think there's also a part of it that he wants to make this a joke. He wants to make this seem unserious. This very serious issue, protecting the integrity of our elections, protecting our political process. He wants to make the attacks on him seem unserious, that he's been vindicated and it's time to move on. That's why he talked about Norway. No one thinks Norway is going to offer
Well, he acted like by throwing that
intelligence.
neutral country out there that's never fought us for anything, it makes it sound like there was no 2-year investigation of Russia.
Or it's the same thing to get information from Russia as it would be from a neutral country or Switzerland or whatever.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.